Hey guys, welcome to this week's SPL Rundown. I'm your host, Apam, and I'm joined here by my three wonderful guests. We got Dan, otherwise known as Betty Smite Esports on YouTube. We have the wonderful Kiki So Cheeky, and making his Smite game debut here, we have Vonnie Vonson Balboa, coming through off of the viral tweets. So, we had to get the boy Vonnie in the SPL Rundown. Be sure to stick around later. I had an interview with the jungler for the Solar Scarabs, Layers. So we talked about a lot of things, especially his sort of foray into playing in the SPL now. And I think we should probably just get right into the games from week 5. I guess it's week 5, right? I think I have that right. Let's start with the Valkyries versus the Jade Dragons. A really big win for the Valkyries in game 1. We saw the Emo Chronos, a bit of a throwback. But, Jade Dragons, they just sort of take it over in games 2 and 3. I especially remember Sam, I think, on the Pele in game 2. Oh, no, maybe that was in a different set that I was watching. But, the Valkyries, they did try their best. But, Jade Dragons were sort of the unbeatable team that we sort of thought they were, especially, I think, with the ping. What are you guys' initial thoughts on Valkyries versus Jade Dragons?
Yeah, Dragons, man, they just lose game 1. And they need that to wake up, I swear. They go from game 1 where they just look like ass. And then, I mean, against Emerald Chronos, what are you going to do? The
Sure.
GOAT. But yeah, literally, just let Sam do his thing and he wins the game. Like, every game. If he's not getting shut down, he just wins it. Every time.
Yeah, what did you guys think about the Soul? I think, this was sort of the first game after the brief respite that the SPL had. And I was not really expecting Soul to be in the meta at all. And we saw quite a few Soul picks this past weekend. What is that really coming from?
Yeah. So, I play a lot of ranked, and I remember seeing the influx of Soul coming about. And I personally have always thought the god was underrated, but with the prioritization she's getting right now in the SPL, I didn't anticipate her to be played this much. But from what I've heard, the biggest reason that she's getting picked a lot right now is because of the Spear of the Magus lifesteal change. Her with purple boots and Spear of the Magus just gives her absolute insane mid pressure. And the Soul is being flexed in ADC, but if you know, it is particularly for mid most of the time.
Sure.
And she just exerts a ton of mid pressure. She's very, very hard to dive, 2 forms of CC immunity, and just so much damage coming out that she's just insane right now.
Yeah. I think I heard some people, I think in Hazer's stream, saying that there wasn't really a bug, maybe an intended interaction where Soul is able to get out basically an extra auto while using her too. I know it's just one extra auto. Maybe we're beaming a little bit, but sometimes that could be a really impactful change. Is that one of the reasons why, or is that reading too much into a small thing?
No, that change is also a really big thing. That change in itemization at full heat late game between her item interactions with Telkines, Rod, and things of that nature, she gets so many extra item procs that adds about like 350 damage to her combo late game, which isn't anything to scoff at.
Sure. Is that still just a waiting game for the Valkyries? Waiting until visas or whatever situation happens where we can get them on a better ping situation?
I don't think that they have plans to move them down right now, do they?
I have no idea, so I'm just sort of asking in a wide open way.
I mean, ideally, obviously, that they'd hope to, but it's still split 1. So really, what matters is that people are meshing well together. And the thing with Soul, Chronos, they're 2 safe mages right now. They have, you have the ult, you have the disengage with Soul, but with Soul, she's kind of just fluff damage. She throws out her 2. Once they remove the stun off her 3, and they've nerfed her ultimate, she kind of doesn't really do enough to hard carry. Whereas Chronos has a stun, which can actually affect what the enemy is doing.
Sure.
So,
I don't know. I feel like the Valks, they have their moments, right, where they look pretty decent. I think Ducky's having a good split. I think there are times when Emerald's playing, they look all right, and then when they start losing, they lose so hard. It was a 3-game set, but it was quicker than most 2-game sets because
Sure.
game 1 was pretty close, went on for a bit. Games 2 and 3 were 19 minutes each. I mean, that is kind of the Dragons just doing. Panda Cat was level 20 in like 16 minutes or something. It's just
5
like,
levels, I think he was
yeah,
on him at one point, which is crazy.
yeah. When they start snowballing, they just like.
I feel like it's going bad when Evil's like wanting to play Jigway and things like that. As long as he's on the Chronos or on something else, maybe the head is in the game. But as soon as I feel like the Jigway pick comes in, you're like, unfortunate for the boys today. Any final thoughts about this Valkyries versus Jade Dragons? I think we're all happy to see the Valkyries taking games off of these teams. It seems like any team can really get a game taken off them at this point. It doesn't matter ping or anything like that. I think we've basically seen that all the teams are, they're not invincible at this point.
Yeah. I think one interesting thing about how the teams typically draft against the Valkyries, coming in, Johnny, this wasn't his rookie season, even though it was oftentimes noted as such, but people are really excited to see how his god pool and playstyle is going to translate to SPL. But a lot of teams just seem to target out Raffer's god pool, and they try to get him off of comfort. And in doing so, he's kind of the gear that makes the whole, wheel turn for them.
Sure.
And usually when they get him off comfort, then that team is significantly lessened.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to the next set of the week, the Kings versus the Oni Warriors. And I think all we have to say here is this was just a clean win from the Kings. Oni Warriors looking pretty in disarray here. They get behind in both these games pretty early on, and I think it was pretty quick work for the Camelot Kings this week.
Yeah, this set, it's so tough because the Oni Warriors, support jungle coming off world champs, right? Neil and Kufo. And every time you see them against another team, even though record-wise they're not necessarily on par in standings, in terms of talent, it's hard to not, peg that as a marquee matchup.
Sure.
The Kings are obviously one of the hotter teams in the league right now, but I think they are definitely a team. And as Kiki said, we don't know if the Valkyrie has plans to move them out or if the Oni Warriors, but I feel like them as a team, once they get all of their players out here and settle, would definitely have probably the biggest margin of difference in play.
Sure. Dan, Kiki, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think against the Kings, right? If you're not winning straight away, you just lose. You have to be so on it from like minute one. And even when you are beating them, they like drag their heels. So if they get a lead, you just lose straight away. Like remember against the Leviathans a few weeks ago, where they had like one team fight all game and they just lost. Like they lost on pure control. So when you're playing against a team like Oni, where they're quite sloppy and give away a few kills here and there, that's just the sort of team the Kings that's like made for their matchup. Sure. Although they did steal Godfrey with Circuit Dash, so that's
Yeah.
Hugo's actually played pretty well. I think this is the first week that I think he's adapted to the ping, to his style. I don't think we've really seen him play Circuit, before that. And Circuit is much more of, I don't want to say pure setup, but like definitely relies a little bit more on the team to do AoE damage, of course, and things like that in the grand scheme of things. And I feel like he really piloted the Circuit, while probably better in other sets this week, maybe not against the Kings, but I think he's sort of figuring out what he can actually do to impact the game, even with the ping. Kiki, I didn't want to cut you off there, sorry.
I'm just forming a thought on the comps here, and really, you have healers on one side, Kings, which make it easy to play.
Sure.
And I'm looking at King's comp, and it doesn't really scream like I'm gonna kill you. Nemesis is a bit of a slow early game, and when I think of Neil Ma, I think of early game aggression, where Neil's able to just create invades into the jungle, right? But if you're just passively farming, that doesn't give your team the chance to play to their strengths. And you see it here where with Kings, they get a little lead and then they're able to keep building it, right? And it's a bit of a snowball. And no matter what team you are, it's hard to stop a snowball.
Feels like Neil is playing like it's PK at Worlds all over again, where they're happy to give up pressure and just play for the late team fights, but it gets to like 25 minutes and like 15k down and they don't have pool on Scylla, so they just lose. So I don't know, tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
Speaking to the drafts as well, it seems like every time I watch the Oni Warriors, they're still searching for their identity, and part of it, I don't think you can understate the fact that 3/5 of their players are playing on insanely high ping right now, which definitely impacts your performance mechanically. Because we've seen Nil play a ton of different gods this season as well. Huvo has, in the latter game sets they've played, defaulted towards the Circuit and Nemesis. But we've seen between that mid core, Volt and Nika seem to be really the only staples that are kind of playing this, quote unquote meta gods.
Sure.
That mid core has been composed of so many different comps. And so I think once they do finally settle on something that they're uncomfortable on, playing on ping, they will also be a lot better.
Yeah. All right, the next set of the week was the Scarabs versus the Leviathans. We can all. I forgot game one. I don't even think it happened as a Scarabs fan. Zap got kept a lot. Yeah. It was like a rigged game. I'm not gonna lie. 17-0. No kills for the Scarabs, unfortunately. Yeah. But the Scarabs come back. Something that I think we've seen a lot from them is learning from their mistakes pretty quickly. They come back. They take game 2. They take this to a game 3, and I think they even look pretty good in this game 3. I think they won or were able to, sort of take the momentum in game 2 off of a misplayed Fire Giant by the Leviathans. I think that's a problem we've seen them have for, quite a bit, especially since the core of this team has been in the SPL. Is this a bad weekend for Zapman on this game, or how you guys feel?
Yeah. Excuse me. I think the game 1. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they wanted to pull out the set win, right? But I think something that is, a good sign for the Scarabs is they almost never lose the same way. Granted, they are losing a lot, but it's never the same way,
sure.
Which shows that they're learning from their mistakes, right? And I remember going into that game 1 draft. In the previous week, they beat the Jade Dragons, right?
Yep.
Bobby's playing Jing Shang, Veronix on the Scylla. And Penny Tom have been playing a lot of Awilix this season. And I said they're going to go into this game 1. They're going to pick these comfort picks because this is what they won with last week. Penny Tom's going to Awilix counterpick them and they're going to get slaughtered. And that was exactly what happened. And I was curious to see if in the next game they were going to make the decision to go away from the comfort picks that they won with or target out Penny Tom in the drafting phase. And they decided to just hit Penny Tom's God Pool, ban out the Awilix so that they can get the comps they wanted with the Yamoja and stuff like that. They also put Zap on Jing Wei after the performance he had in the previous game, which I thought was pretty funny. He put on an intel mode queue, so they said we'll just give him the safest hunter in the game and just let him have fun. But I definitely think there were some good signs from the Scarabs, and I don't think anyone can deny that even in light of their losses, they're definitely improving.
Sure.
Yeah. The moment I saw Zap jump between tier 1 and tier 2, when there were like 3 people right there, I was like, oh, it's happening. It's weird to think, like, given how bad this set could have gone, it was pretty good for the Scarabs. I mean, they played like about 45 minutes without getting a kill, like a game and a half. Like 20 minutes into game 2, they got their first kill.
Yep.
And they're getting so good at playing these like really scuffed late games where everything is like all over the place. It's like the old PK. It's like, when everything's up in the air, they just managed to find like that sneaky Fire Giant or something. And they did the exact same against the Titans a few weeks ago, where I mean they lost that game, but like it should have been over in 10 minutes. But they are scrappy and they do not lose easily. So that's like a really good sign, because there are a lot of lower end teams you've seen in previous years where it never looked like they were going to win. They never had that sort of extra level to them. So if they can just sort out their laning phase, like they could have a real run. But I don't know, there's a lot to do. I'm going to give a shout out to Panatom though. I feel like he's been a really underappreciated member of Sanguine for so long. He's having such a good season. I mean, Shinto's just doing Shinto things, and like everyone's going to give him the hype, which is like fully fair. But I think he's quietly having like his best season.
I agree. The way they play the map too, it doesn't really like behoove Penny Tom to have good performances. They funnel a lot of their farm into Shinto. Shinto solos a lot of back camps, which a lot of other mids don't do. That's how he gets his lead. And Rangyu this season has camped dual lane a lot. And so Panytom essentially is deprived of the backhand farm and also roams the map by his lonesome, when many other times it's an entire mid trio he's encountering, and he's still able to put on these like incredible performances. I think I agree with Dan. I think this year Panytom, for what it's worth so far, this might be a hot take, but I will die on the hill that so far I think Panytom is the best jungler in the league. Yes.
All right. I
Sure.
guess.
Kiki, your thoughts on this set?
You know what I would say with Scarabs is, they played all different gods except Merlin game 2 and 3. So if you're a new team, I don't think you want to be throwing in a whole bunch of different picks every once in a while. You kind of just want to focus on the foundation, stick to the basics. Like you look at Shinto's team, they've always wanted to play a certain way. It's a very slow paced. We'll get to the late game. Let's play, kind of safer Jingwei, Jingchen. Get to late game, and we win the game through teamwork, right? So Solar Scarabs, they got the teamwork, but the drafting, they need to chill on the draft. They need to focus what they like, what works for them, and they need to just keep honing that, right? Their new team just keep working on that chisel.
Sure. I think Slaney made a comment after the set, maybe talking about the first game, saying he really screwed up the draft for them in that first game at least.
Yeah.
Which I think Bonnie accurately pointed out here. And obviously they're getting things that they're comfortable with, but also you let them get counterpicked. I think that's a reason probably why Layers even took the Awilix, just like, hey, we just can't leave this god open at all. So I don't know. It is hard to say. I think a lot of coaches are hesitant to just tell a player like, hey, no, you can't play these gods, right? When they're like, hey, I want to play something. And I think that's part of building the game plan that you're going to have for each team and things like that. So
Takes discipline as well.
yeah, definitely. I did want to ask about the Chiron ADC. I think we saw it a little bit earlier in the J Dragon set, but really I think Yarkor put on a pretty good show with the Chiron ADC in this game, especially in game 1, but relied on it in game 3 to seal the deal here. What is with I think we can just talk about these Bluestone ADCs in general, right? Like we're going to see Medusa come up in a couple of later games, and Chiron, of course, was sort of the talk of the town this weekend. What is up with these Bluestone things? And it feels like a lot of this is I saw a Duke Sloth video. Shout out to Duke Sloth about these Aussie changes, and everyone's putting Aussie up now. So what's going on with these Bluestone hunters?
So it coincides with the Bluestone buff hasn't come through, or excuse me, the Transcendence buff has not come through yet.
Yep.
In which they're reducing the price, but even with the nerfs towards the crit builds we've had within the last 3 patches, I think Wind Demon has been hit, and Ornate Arrow has been hit twice as well. And so with the nerf to crit hunters, Bluestone and Transcendence Star has always been a way to dominate lane with just the amount of power that you have over the crit hunter. It doesn't scale as well, which is reflected in how difficult it is for a lot of teams to do Fire Giant right now. Crit is just insane DPS on those objectives, whereas an ability-based hybrid Transcendence build isn't as much so, but it gives you a lot of lane pressure and a lot more burst early game. Also, the huge Chiron buff, knock-up immunity on his 3.
Sure.
2 of the hunters right now, Heim and Anher, are really, really big in the meta, as well as Jamoja being a support, right, with her Riptide having a knock-up. She no longer can catch Chiron Dash. He has a pretty good matchup into the 2 most meta hunters right now. That, as well with his build paths getting buffed, he was definitely going to have a pretty big resurgence.
Yeah, and as well, it's on the note of the Chiron thing. So you build as Vonnie said, you build that Bluestone build to just dominate early, and you basically want to win the game within like 20 minutes, which is what Panda Cat was doing before. And in terms of winning level 2, Chiron is like the best in the game at it. You dash in and like there's just nothing they can do. They have to beads level 2, and it's just a nightmare for them. And so it's funny though, because you start to see this weird mesh where people are thinking, right, I want to use like a trans build, but I don't want to be useless by 25 minutes.
Right.
So it's kind of like curving it into crit as well. And I think it's in this really awkward spot where like I don't think if you're going to build crit, stick to it, because it's still a good build, right? I know it's been hit a lot, but it's still not bad by any means. I feel like people are kind of trying. They're a bit of an identity crisis going on. They don't really know what they want. They're just building everything.
Yeah, I'm about to see some Failnut, right? Love me some Failnut. Let's bring back.
It's coming back.
Kiki, any thoughts on these Bluestone hunters sort of coming back into the meta?
They're nerfing crit, buffing anti-crit. You got Nemeans, you know, and then also buffing power. So people are saying, what if we throw in ability-based hunters? Our crit hunters are going to get, you know, tanked on anyway. So might as well shoot from an artillery.
Yeah, I think Zap has sort of stuck to his britches here and is complaining that, you know, even if you go these sorts of Bluestone builds or these power 10 builds, you're not able to do enough damage to tanks in the late game. Is that something that you guys are finding to be true in, you know, whether either you're playing or, you know, looking at these games? Is crit still going to be the thing? Like if you want to hit tanks and kill tanks as an ADC, are you still going to need crit?
Yeah, Zapman's a notorious hot takers. He always, like, half of his tweets I take with just a grain of salt, because I don't know if he's just trying to rile the masses or actually offering a commentary on the current state of the game. But he's spot on in that one, because the proof is in the pudding. If you take a look at the games, he, Vote, and I don't recall who the other ADC was, but over the course of their game, 3K pots are in an absolutely absurd spot right now. People will forego getting speed pot and another item for a 3K pot.
Sure.
But they transformed their entire Transcendence power builds to crit builds as the game went on, because they were, one, unable to kill Fire Giant quickly enough, and two, unable to kill tanks quickly enough. And the game, I think, right now is played from front to back, especially with Sunder and stuff like that being meta.
Sure.
You hit what's in front of you, whatever is in front of you gets sundered, you kill that, and then you cascade the fight and everything behind it. But Transcendence doesn't really give you that avenue of team fight once you get to the later stages of the game. And so these hunters, recognizing that, are going these trans build to get to late game. If the game is not over, they'll then switch back and convert their builds into the crit path so that they can actually kill tanks and Fire Giant.
Sure.
Yeah, and sort of adding to that, that's part of the reason why Chiron is so good, because you can get that damage on the backline without having to get right in their face, because you can ult from so far away and then two after that, and it means you're guaranteed like a massive chunk of damage, in the same way that, I don't know, like a Medusa, there's a good chance she'll get damage, but it's not a guaranteed. Whereas you think of like Emil against, I think it was like the Titans, I can't remember which game it was, but there's a game he was playing Chiron, and he was just ulting near Fire Giant and hitting like 3 or 4 people, hitting the 2, and he's already done like 2k damage before the fight's even started, really. So
Oh, I would say with okay, so with Jarkor, he gets Executioner, which helps with Fire Giant, and I usually found that you have to pair that with a good Assassin. So he has Dodgy in one of the games, and then a Willix. So that's gonna make sure that you can do the Fire Giant. But game 2, they have a tanky Circuit, and so he's a crit on her this time. So they know exactly what they're doing, because they think about their comp as a whole component.
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out there, seeing the change based on how the picks and bans has sort of played out.
I don't want to say one other thing about this set. I feel like Boronic is finding his feet. Like, he's getting better every set, I feel like. At the beginning, I thought he was a bit ropey, a bit rusty, but I feel like with each set, you can actually see him making more of an impact, as long as he's not standing on top of the Titan in certain game-ending situations, but we'll get to that later.
All right, let's move on to the Olympus Bolts versus the Tartarus Titans. This one also another longer set. It goes the full distance, all 3 games here. I think, there was a bit of a crazy start to game 1, if I remember. Everyone met up at the Gold Fury pit and decided to have a little skirmish at level 1, which ended up with a couple quick kills for the Titans. And now, from then on, it was a back and forth, pretty contentious set, but the Bolts are really showing sort of their class and how good they are here by being able to beat these teams that are sort of creeping up to challenge them, I think. What are you guys' sort of initial thoughts on Bolts versus the Titans?
Okay, in regards to the level 1 shenanigans that happened, I was surprised more teams weren't doing this at the start of the season. before Invader's Curse was a thing, we used to see many more wards across the map. It's really important to see how teams are starting, how junglers are pathing, so that you know where they're applying pressure and how to counteract that, etc., etc. But the Titans, for the most part, have taken the exact same jungle pathing, auroring them to ward red every single time. And I was like, at some point, some team has to see this and catch him out. Every once in a while, they'll get lazy with it and not send full 5. But fortunately for them, they did this time. And we just had an absolute team fight at level 1 in Gold Fury Pit. But in regards to the set, I was a bit concerned for the Titans coming into this set because the boats have been hot, right? They're 5 or 6-2 on the season so far.
Yep.
And they're actually a lot better than I think people realize when they just look at their names compared to some of the other teams in the league. The Titans seem to be having some issues with synergy amongst their team. And a big thing that I really dislike about their drafts is the Giannis Athena pairing. I do think double global is pretty strong because of the pressure it can apply to side lanes, but the Titans don't seem to fight in side lanes often. Typically, if there's any pressure solo side, it's Scary D solo assisting Benji to invade blues. And we've already talked about how Bluestone builds inability to kill tanks. Cyclone's been playing Chiron Medusa. Even on Kernanos, he built Bluestone Transcendence. And Paul is playing Giannis, a god who is notoriously poor at killing tanks. And they're drafting Athena, who out of support, her job is typically to kill tanks. Yeah, and they've been struggling with that. Late game, they kind of get into this whole controlled chaos thing. And it reminds me a lot of how the Solar Scares play the late game, where they just kind of take it one step at a time, and whatever happens, happens if they push their buttons well enough. But I think the Bolts did a really good job of exploiting the way that the Titans drafted.
Yeah, it's one of those things with the Janus Athena where I think both of them have looked good separately, but you're right. It's so disappointing to see a big taunt into like a portal hitting a tank for like 200. It's like, what's the point of that? But yeah, it's mental how Paul has like never played Janus and then is now like one of the best in the league on it. Every game I'm like blown away. He's building that Mirrodin build, which is so obnoxious, and they ult through 2 twice and just like kill the carries in 1. But I thought this could have gone either way super easily. I think this is some of the best the Titans have looked. I mean, Bonnie's right, they've still got a lot to work on, but I think each week, whereas in the first few weeks, they were losing every single time, they didn't really look much better. I feel like each week now, they're like taking massive steps. And Addicts on Hercules, what a Chad.
Yeah, what a Chad.
Absolute dawn.
Unfortunately, we didn't see him play Herc. Did he play it in the first 2 games and not the last one? I think so.
Yeah, King Arthur the last.
I think he was Arthur in the last game.
Yep. The last thing I did want to mention here is I think we see Lazaro pick up the Gilgamesh jungle a couple of times in this set. Maybe even all 3. No, he picks Fenrir in the last game, but still. You know, what have you guys expected from this new god, especially in comp? I think, you know, in ranked he's probably appropriately valued, but do you feel like he's a first pick, first ban sort of god, or it depends on players, or is he just a good god in the meta right now?
Yeah, I've not played much, but I think in comp, the value you get from him is the fact that his ult is almost always like gets a ton of value. It's so easy to get off and get like you get 2 or 3 people in there pretty consistently, and if you get the right people, you can just kill them almost instantly. I don't think he's first pick, first ban sort of stuff yet, but like he's a god that you need to have in your team somewhere, because I feel like there's going to be one player who's going to push him over the edge soon, and then he's going to become like a first pick, first ban sort of thing.
Sure. Bonnie?
Yeah, some teams value him pretty differently. Or some teams don't play the god at all. He's not picked or banned. Some teams that don't play it will ban it just because they know the other guys do it or play it. And some teams, like we've seen the Bolts and the Kings, I believe it was, top picked it. When I first played against the god, I didn't think he was going to be that impactful. But I think something that really works in his favor is the fact that he's essentially a triple flex. We've seen him played in 3 different roles so far in the limited amount of time he's been out. He's been played jungle, support, and solo. And so if the way drafts typically are going right now is if a team can get a priority support pick, whether that be Fafnir, who's seen an influx given the fact that we've seen a lot of Soul getting
Sure.
played right now. He works well with WADC. If they can get their hands on a Soul Ymir Fafnir, they'll take that. Probably their solo laner, Arthur Kakulu or Kakolin spammers with an ADC. And if they can get Gilgamesh, then they can disguise one of those picks for later on in the draft because he disguises so much. You don't know where the god is going. He can utilize a lot of different build paths. And I see him, a lot of people use his ultimate in order to get resources. I think a lot of players undervalued his ultimate because you could slap on a wing blade or just jump or dash out of it. But you have to look at it from the perspective of if a guy Gilgamesh ults and he gets 2 jumps and a dash, that's a lot of utility in a team fight. That's now 3 players missing mobility in which his team can capitalize on. And so I think the pros, being pros, were the first ones to really recognize his value beyond that. And now they're just making him look really strong.
That's like 50% of a Nodin ult almost, you know?
Yeah.
Kiki, your thoughts on this set?
On the set, I'll say one, bolts are, the rookies with some veterans, so they're out to draw blood. Great things coming out from them. They're definitely meeting and exceeding expectations.
Yeah,
sure.
But on the other hand, you have some veterans, straight up veterans, right? But Scary D in the jungle, so obviously his footing's a bit, he's going to stumble. It's fine. He's learning. I hope that they're treating him well while he's, messing up a little bit. I see some 1-in-5s Nemesis here when he's an assassin.
Yeah.
And then Erlang Shen, 1-in-5 again. But notice 4-in-5 on the Osiris jungle. He's in his comfort zone. He knows how to be that beefy character, right?
Yeah.
So he needs to just find his identity in the jungle. And I think that we'll start seeing them really just take 2 O's. I think they're going to randomly start surprising us. That's how Aurora is usually.
Yeah, I fully agree in terms of the picks for Scary. I've been saying it from like week 1. Don't give him these like super careful, like awkward assassins like the Nemesis, stuff like that. Where you have to really pick your engagements. Like, if you remember him solo, he just spammed Guan and just altered the backline every time. Give him something that could do that. Like, he made Osiris the jungle look good, and I hate Osiris jungle. So, like, if he can make that look good, then he's getting there. But I think the Fenrir looked good, the Raven looked good. Just keep him off these like really, I don't want to say difficult gods, but like really. I don't know what the right word is, but the gods that adapt to it, don't pick those. Yeah, pick the ones like the Captain Twiggles play.
Sure.
Is that BM? Is that mean?
It's not that.
That's a fair say.
All right. Any final thoughts here about the Bolt versus the Titans?
Is this the game that Barra jingled to the Fire Giant, by the way? I just want to put that out there.
No.
I don't think so.
That was the other set. Actually, no, this was the set. Yeah, where Paul stole it with Giannis. And then he throws the stream up after any jingle through, any FG jingle through. I just love that. But I think a lot of credit is due to Venenu. I think he was the big question mark coming into this season. Last year, I don't think Venenu himself would dispute this. He had a pretty lackluster season.
Sure.
And yeah, coming in here, we saw Haddix playing really well as a substitute for Sanguine, especially given the fact that the language barrier was a big thing and he was still able to perform that well. He had really high expectations coming into this season. He and Jake are obviously friends with a lot of synergy, and I think that helps them when they're diving backlines together. Haddix has been well. Lasbra also is finally looking like the jungler that everyone knew he could be, but a lot of it is because Venenu is finally in form again, playing really, really well in the mid lane. So I think a lot of credit is due to him for how he's been pulling it together.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the season, I thought they were going to come in really hot and then tail off, because they're coming in hot as a team that stay together and then tail off kind of as they hit their ceiling. But I think you're right. Haddix and Ven have raised their ceilings by a mile, and they look so much better than I thought they were going to.
This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with the jungler for the Solar Scarabs, Layers, to talk about getting into the SPL and his expectations and experiences being in this new league, as well as talking about Season 8 and how he's been doing so far, as well as the team. Check it out. Hey guys, I'm here with the jungler for the Solar Scarabs, Layers, to talk a little bit about Season 8, the new group stage format, and his SPL career, short SPL career on the whole as well. So I think, the biggest thing that we have to talk about here is the start of season 8 and, how it's been going for you guys. Unfortunately, it hasn't been sort of the best start. You haven't really sort of come running out of the gates. I don't think anyone expected that out of this team, but can you talk a little bit about sort of the team mentality and how you guys are dealing with some of these early struggles?
We're taking a day at a time, a scrim at a time, just trying to improve is the biggest thing. Is improving each or every scrim.
Mm-hmm.
It's just improvement. I mean, obviously we're new. It's gonna be rough to begin with. We're playing against people that have been playing in the SPL for multiple years.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to learn, a lot to catch up on. I think we're doing fair though, considering we
Sure,
didn't finish
sure.
dead last. I always thought that we would be like a bottom middle pack of the team,
Mhm.
like the start, and that's right where we are. So.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, you guys have had some pretty big wins. I looked to the Dragons win that you guys had, and I think even playing the Leviathans this past weekend, you guys looked pretty good as well. Can you talk a little bit about like how those wins maybe help your confidence and maybe are sort of like the proof in the pudding of you guys learning from these sets and games?
If anything, they're like constant, like beating like the Dragons and then taking a game off the Leviathans. Like, if anything, it's like it's like a kind of like reassurance. Like,
Mhm.
we belong. Like, we can beat these teams, or we can come out and we can play against these teams. That's the biggest probably pointer. It's
Mhm.
obviously like a really good thing for morale.
Sure.
It makes everyone feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's just off like when we beat the Dragons, we scrimmed like all week, every day for like
Mhm.
3 to 4 hours. So you put like so much time in, and you like grind, and then you get like rewarded. It's not. It feels nice. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's definitely
Definitely.
really good for us to beat a big or a really good team like the Dragons early on. I thought we would struggle and not be able to like take a game, but we were able to just beat them, which is kind of blew my expectations out the water,
Yeah, I
so to
think
speak.
I think blew a lot of fans' expectations out of the water. I mean, I'm a big Solar Scarabs fanboy, as you know, Layers, and
Yeah, yeah,
even I was. I mean, I might have chosen the 2-0, but it's always
yeah.
exciting to see that happen anyway.
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of your core, which I think a lot of people probably were coming in saying this, it's sort of an unproven sort of core. I mean, I'm talking mainly you, Baronic, and Inbound. Inbound, I think, was essentially the bottom support in the SPL all of last season. How has that been? Have you guys all sort of been in the same mindset, because you're all relatively new to the league? Or, how do you feel about working with a core of all new players?
Um, Obviously, we were gonna have our struggles a little bit. I don't think we've really struggled though. I
Mhm.
mean, we've had maybe a couple rough games, but overall, I think when we've played together for like multiple years on console, that core of us three, we've been playing for like 3 to 4 years.
Mhm.
So we have a lot of experience together, and we're all friends with each other. So it's like the sky's the limit basically. All we have to
Sure.
really do is just catch up to the SPL like meta, the SPL like play style, because
Mhm.
it obviously differs. On the touch on people that they think we're undeserving, I think me and Bobby are both deserving.
Mhm.
I think I'm deserving as well because I played that whole year of SCC. I started at the bottom in the SCC and I worked my way up and I ended up winning and qualifying for Worlds.
Yeah.
The only one that you could argue is maybe undeserving is Baronic, maybe because
I mean, he's been popping off a little bit,
he's been doing well though. He's been doing well, but that's the only one that you can maybe argue because he didn't play for the last half of the year. But I put a
Sure.
lot of time in, so I think my shot in the SPL is deserving. I think Bobby deserves to be in the SPL too, even though he was considered the worst SPL support. I think he's a lot better than he was.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
definitely been improvement. There's definitely been improvement in his regard.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's definitely noticeable from, even my perspective. I made a tweet a while ago saying basically how like, every game you guys play, it just looks better than the last game. You're able to
Mhm.
adapt in the middle of sets, change something up and make it hard for your opponents, which is something that, even top teams struggle with. And if you can adapt sort of at world stage, that's something that is going to throw a lot of teams for a bit of a loop.
Yeah, to touch on that too is we played against Leviathans the first game and we got absolutely slaughtered
Yeah.
17-0. And
Hmm.
then we turn around the second game, we were getting slaughtered in the beginning and we realized that we had a good team fighting comp and we had one good fight and we turned the tables at the end of the game and we were able to win. So it doesn't really matter. Kills don't really matter too much
Hmm.
in comp. I
Sure.
think people kind of overvalue the kills. I mean, kills is what gets you to win. The
Hmm.
way to win games in competitive is objective control and buff control and stuff like that because that's where you get most of the farm.
Right.
Kills are kind of like the last thing on that chain that really like so maybe it's like first blood, but like just kills to get kills
Mhm.
don't really matter. Like if you're killing someone and then you're getting like something afterwards, that's when it starts to matter, and that's where
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
get snowballs and stuff like that.
yeah. As FDOT likes to say, the stuff after the stuff, right?
Yeah, it's the F dot F. You gotta get the stuff after the stuff. That's what it is.
I wanted to, talk a little bit about your coach Slaney. I imagine that this is probably the first time you've had like such a dedicated uh, coach position on a lot of your teams. Can you talk about the experience of having someone like that, maybe related to your previous teams and things like that?
I had a really good coach back on Hype Unit,
Sure.
in Visions.
Yeah.
No one really knew him, but he did a lot behind the scenes. I think Slaney is on the same level, or if not better than Visions. He puts a lot of work in. He's definitely got Google spreadsheets for us. He does for each scrim that we have. He writes down each comp and like what the comp excels at and what the comp did in the game. Right.
Mhm.
He also logs what picks we play and what picks we play against and like how well we or like what's our track record versus that pick in general.
Mhm.
Like if we leave open Tiamat and we lose every game or we lose every game against Tiamat, and we maybe like won't want to leave her open because we have a bad track record versus her.
Sure.
So like that's a big thing. He's really really good at like writing it down for us and making sure we have the best comp possible. And he's really good at
Mhm.
helping us draft. He's an extra brain, so I think he's really really experienced. He was the coach for Rival for a couple of seasons,
Rival for a
and
couple of
they
seasons and
yep,
Ghost
and then Ghost, yeah.
and
And they finished second twice at Worlds. They were like one game off winning Worlds, which is like, like obviously he's a good coach and he brings a lot of experience to us. So
sure. I wanted to talk a little bit, maybe more specifically about your jungle sort of style. I think we've seen you play maybe like both sides of the coin here. Like we see you play some hyper carries, like set sometimes, and then we've sort of seen you maturing to playing more setup type junglers, like Erlang Shen and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how your jungle style has maybe changed since you've been in the SPL so far?
I think for the most part my style has been the same.
Mhm.
I've always picked like obviously whatever the team thinks and whatever is best for the team, but sometimes I do like to pick the selfish picks and like set and stuff and like the
Mhm.
hyper carries. I really think I'm a pretty flexible player in the fact that I could play either setup or hyper carry.
Mhm.
I think I'm a lot better on that hyper carry style though, like set and like the Thor, like or Thor's kind of a mixture of both. Like Thor can like kind of hard carry games and he can also play setup too.
Sure.
I think the same thing with like Erling as well, but I feel like I've always had that style where I could kind of like I'm pretty two way. I play two different ways for sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I did also, while we're still talking about, your team and things like that, I did want to point out, you guys did post a little Backstreet Boys sing along recently. Is that
yeah.
how's the team camaraderie go? Do you guys find dig that it's easy to sort of jive with each other now that you guys are maybe 6-8 weeks into the SPL?
A big thing on each team that I try to play on is that we have to have fun.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, winning matters, and it's like that's the whole point of playing.
Right.
But like, and then losing sucks, right? No one wants to lose. But if you're not have fun doing it, like whether you're winning or losing, like there's a problem, right? You
Sure.
should be trying to have the most fun you can with why you can. Um, Life's short.
Mhm.
If you can't already tell, because we lost John Finch at 28, you never know what can happen
Yeah.
at any time. So you got to try to enjoy your moments and enjoy your teammates, be around your teammates, and make sure you're nice. Because when everyone's happy, everyone's just gonna play better and loose. So that's a big thing.
Sure.
I
Sure.
always don't mind singing a tune or two with my boys in scrims. That's for sure. I'm
Yeah,
down to
I
do.
hope Slody posts some more things. Can we got requests? Can we do fan requests and things like
Yeah,
that?
fair request. A boy want to sing
Yeah,
to. Yeah.
I want some hips don't lie. Okay.
All right. Maybe we'll see.
All right, piggybacking off that question a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how this, your first SPL season maybe has compared to your expectations that you might have had before the season started?
I never really thought I was gonna. I knew I was SPL material. I never thought in my head that I was gonna just be the best player outright when I first started. I think I am a pretty solid jungle in my own right.
Mhm.
I still have room to improve and room to grow, like individually and as a team player as well. I think the sky's the limit for our team. We can only get better,
Sure.
I believe. So, for expectations, like I said, I never expected me to just come out guns blazing, being the best, like out jungling everyone. But I don't feel like I've had a really like bad season so far. I feel like I've had like a above average season so far for the Scarabs.
I think I would definitely agree with that as
Yeah,
well.
I haven't been the best, but I haven't been the worst. So I'm
Yeah.
like right in the middle, I'd say.
Sure. And I think also, that maybe belays the point that I think everyone is pretty close together in terms of, mechanical skill and things like that. And a lot of it I think comes down to, teamwork and communication more than, people hitting abilities and like
I
that.
think I have to add on to that. Is I don't think people understand how much like you could be the sickest individual like mechanical player in the game, and if you don't have a solid teammates around you, you aren't going to do well.
Yeah.
Like, look at Johnny. Like Johnny's like obviously he's on pin, but people give him so much praise. They say he's like the best mechanical player that Smite's seen since like adapting,
Mhm.
and they're not. They're like 7th seed. Like they're like 1-6 or something.
They're
Like they're not
looking.
doing well.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're not doing well.
they've been looking a little bit better,
They've been
recently.
looking better.
You know,
They're all playing on ping, so it's not really fair to
I mean,
judge.
it's very hard to judge
Yeah,
because of the ping. But
but I'm saying, yeah,
I'm willing to give, especially the ping players, the benefit of the doubt.
yeah,
We've seen them perform on LAN, countless times. I'm, just honestly thinking of Raffer and Email. So,
yeah,
and even zeros for that matter. So,
yeah. They're all great players. It's just ping is like tough, and then I don't really think the first split holds as much value to a lot of players because
sure.
obviously they're on ping, and the games don't really matter as much, and
Mhm.
there's no land for the first phase either because of COVID and stuff.
Great.
So that's why a lot of people are not really too worried if their
Yeah.
team's not doing too hot. I'm not. We're not worried. The Scarabs. I feel like like I said, we're only going to get better throughout the year. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm not sure if I've asked you this question before or not, but do you have any sort of rivals in the SPL now, or maybe throughout your career leading up to the SPL? Or and on the flip side of that coin, do you have any mentors or people who've helped you along on your journey to get to here?
I wouldn't say I really have rivals yet. I haven't been playing the SPL long enough to like have a rival.
Sure.
I feel like there's got to be a little bit more time. If I were to have a rival, I'd say it would be Johnny
Hmm.
because we're both rookies and then we both played against each other in like the SEC and stuff. Or I think I played it like I was on in console, but we were at the PC LAN and they were there too. So, also the back end of the question. What did you say for the back end of the question? You said something about
Like mentors. Have there been any people
mentors.
who've helped you on your journey to get here?
I talked to Sino a lot
Hmm.
before I was in the SPL, and we would just kind of like bounce ideas off each other, uh, like about like picks that we think are good or like certain. I don't really think I've ever had like a jungle coach me per
Right.
se, but I've definitely talked to like Sino and a couple other junglers about like picks and like what can work and what can't work and just like theory crafting and stuff. If
Yeah.
anything, for like a mentor, I'd probably say Sino, maybe.
Sure. So what you're telling me is we're gonna see the Neja come out, right?
I don't think I can pilot the character the same way he can, but maybe. I think I played her. I think I played her or played him once, and that was against the Bolts, like our
Yeah.
first set.
Hmm.
And that's like the only time. I mean, he's set up to the core, right?
Right.
He's not really like a hyper carry.
Sure.
So you gotta really rely on your team, where you're just basically just pure setup at that point with that pick. So
Yeah. All right, Layers. It is that time of the interview where I ask you, got anybody to shout out, or if you're beefing with anybody, is there anybody you like to call out? Is there someone who's making your scrims not as fun as you want them to be? Is there someone who's not singing the melodies along to Backstreet Boys in the group chat? Or what is the soapbox is yours here. You can rant and rave about whatever you want.
I gotta shout out my team, obviously, and the Solar Scarabs brand. If you guys haven't picked up your Solar Scarabs merch yet, gotta go ahead and head to www.smitepro.com, and there should be a little merch tab. You gotta pick up your Solar Scarabs merch. One guy that I have been having trouble with recently is Steven Zappis. He is not popping his actives in the SPL matches, and it's pissing me off a little bit. So I'm kidding. He knows. He already knows he made a mistake. He knows.
He's old, okay? The reaction times, they definitely slow down, okay?
Yeah, he's
blame
older.
it on that.
Can't blame him. He's 29.
Yeah.
On his way to 30. Can't really
Sure.
blame him. 9-year veteran.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. I appreciate you coming on and let me talk to you, and I wish you and the Solar Scarabs, I'll be rooting for you. I'm picking you guys to get to 2-0 every other team here, so
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Even though we're not really a 2-0 team, we always have like a really bad first game, and then we adapt and overcome the next two. But we're just the worst first game team in the whole league. So come in 0-17 and then we flip it around. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm
Yeah.
excited for the world's run as well, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck to you and your team.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Now we have the new group stages. I think just for the end of phase 1, and I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on if splitting up into groups is going to change the way certain teams play, and if you expect to see certain, I don't want to say maybe meta changes, but since you're only facing 3 teams, is there something to be said about maybe individualizing matchups a little bit more in something like a group stages than a traditional sort of round robin where you have to play all 7 of the other teams?
Yeah, I think because if you're playing, typically when you're playing a round robin scenario, right, in which you're going to play every team at least once, it's really difficult to develop full scale game plans for the competition that you're going to be playing against.
Sure.
So what typically happens is you find your core strategies, the way that you like to play the map, and you stick to that and apply that to the meta. Whereas when you're operating within a group, you know who your opponents are going to be ahead of time. That allows you to game plan for the teams you're actually playing. Not that you don't still develop strategies for yourself, right? But you'll see a lot more targeted bans, takeaway picks, etc., because people are playing to counter the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally prefer that because I think the strategy and micro games in terms of picks and bans is really, really interesting to see. And so I think it's really fun to watch how teams are developing strategies. Like we mentioned, some teams are really big Fafnir prioritizers right now. Some guys really, really like Gilgamesh, and seeing teams play around the particular opposition they're facing, I personally prefer to see.
Yeah,
Dan
I
or
fully
TP?
echo that.
Sure.
I think in the first few weeks you see teams picking and like strategizing, trying to work out what's best for them, and now we're going to start to see them really try and work out what's best against the other teams. And I think we're already seeing that in terms of stuff like when Leviathans played Bolts, you saw them gunning for wrong use God Pool. It was like either pick 1 and ban 2 of Ymir, Umoja, and Sobek, and just basically force them on something new. And I feel like that's the first time we're really seeing people come in with like a dedicated plan. Because usually it's just kind of the occasional target ban here and there, mostly meta bans. But now we're gonna really see the kind of top teams get tested by the lower end teams as they try and really figure them out individually.
Yeah, you see it as teams get more comfortable with just the basics.
Mhm.
That's when you can start throwing in random things. Oh, maybe we get value from taking wrong use God here and we just ban him out, right? Like that's when you can start playing to beat the enemy once you're comfortable with yourself. But a lot of these teams are busy figuring out what's going on with their team. It sucks with the whole moving thing. They can't all really experience the the full thing as they would be as a team. So it's just growing pains. And I think everyone's more or less, though, on a decent footing, I would say.
Sure. All right, on to the start of the group stages here. The first set of the group stages was the Olympus Bolts versus the Leviathans. And I think in the past we might have called this an upset, but right now it doesn't really feel like an upset. It just feels sort of like the Surging Bolts are, doing their thing. I think it's a really big win for them to get this first set win because there's only sort of 3 sets in this group stage. There's a very interesting pace race, I believe, in game 1, sort of, where I guess half the team backed for the Bolts and half the team didn't, and that's never an ideal situation. But I think the Bolts basically ran games 2 and 3, and a big win for them. You guys have thoughts on the Olympus Bolts versus the Leviathans? And
Yeah, coming into this set, the Leviathans are rocking the first seed, right?
Mhm.
In the entire league. But I actually think the top 4 is a lot. I think that's pretty close, man. 1 through 4, any of these teams could beat anybody.
Mhm.
And the Bolts will probably be, listed as the fourth team amongst that kind of Rushmore of teams right now, being the
Sure.
Leviathans, Camelot Kings, and Jade Dragons. But this honestly didn't surprise me. I mean, looking at these drafts in every single game, I thought that the Bolts came out with the better draft. The Hercules pick is something that we've seen, which gets outright pressure against the gods like Colin and Arthur. He outclears them and can outtrade them if he plays around their kit well enough. We also saw Sarkett be a really big pick of contention. Seeing Hercules get picked, Erlong Shen in game 2, and even Hell and Guan Yu respectively for each team in game 3. And so I was surprised to not see Leviathan's prioritize stat pick a little bit higher, but Veneno has been pulling out the Zhong Kui, which I still think that god is absolutely terrible. I mean, he manages to get his wins on it. So power to him.
Wait, I swear Zhong hasn't had a win yet, has he? I think he's like
lost
0-5.
game.
Sounds
Is
like
he?
a question for Gorbizer.
Yeah. Maybe I'm right. That god is absolutely terrible. No, he actually did win a game against the Titans in the previous set against them, one of them. But yeah, man. Like I said, I think that god is stinky poo poo, but nonetheless, he manages to pull it out and make it work. And the Leviathans, I think, it's so scary because they're such a good team, and I genuinely think they can be Worlds winners. But every time there's a group stage or something like that, we kind of see them falter back to their old ways, in which they play relatively passive and let other teams just impact the map, in which they're waiting for that inevitable 20-minute Leviathans team fight, in which their cohesion and synergy is just so much better. They win it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it the best, where you would have thought this was a shock a few weeks ago, because I think the league was pretty clearly defined. You had the top 3, then the Bolts, and then the rest.
Right.
But you're right, they're kind of like 3.5. They're like right there, and they can definitely punch above their weight. And yeah, I think Vonnie just said everything I was going to say, basically. I actually wrote a note as I was watching the game, and it said, Ven is having his best season by a mile. Just imagine if he picked someone who wasn't Jean. Like, he's just looked so much better. And like, they really... I think you're right about the Leviathans as well, in terms of whenever there's anything on the line, they just... I think the problem is that they love their strategy of, pick the stuff that's good all the time, because why not, right? But it means that they have 4 picks each kind of thing that they are really comfortable with. And then it means that they set themselves up so nicely, so when a team wants to really needs to beat them and really pulls the game out, they're such an easy team to study, because it's exactly what they want to pick. Like, off the top of my head, I can tell you, I could probably draft their entire comp right now, just off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, they are still, I think, one of the best teams. I think they, like you said, can be world beaters. And I think, realistically, Bolts played really well. They could have won game 1 if Lasbra didn't just int at the end of game and just tried to clear a wave with Circuit Dash. Why? Why would you do that right next to an Athena? But yeah, I think they're just Bolts are going from strength to strength, man. And Haddock's stealing objectives against the Leviathans, that's the most on-brand thing. If they just need to get Fire Giants. That's if they get Fire Giants, that's half of their woes solved right there.
Kiki, your thoughts?
I mean, Bolts aside, I would say looking at game 3, they pick a Willick Sobek, but you're plucking them into a Hell. That's not really gonna be that boom boom damage, right? You actually saw that with Scarabs. They picked, they took the Willix, they took Sobek, but they had, I forget what the mage was, but it was not big burst damage, right?
I think it was Merlin.
I think it was Merlin. So he's kind of tickle damage, he'll get you eventually, but it doesn't really hurt that much.
Sure.
So you're right, we touched on their god pool. They really need to maybe try to expand it and not be so easy to get red, because, I mean, if you're a team that's starting to get better, people are going to pay you respects, and they're going to study you. They're going to try to beat you as best as they can. So,
yeah, that's the point that I wanted to touch on too. If we know that you're going to pick the good stuff, everyone else knows that you're going to pick the good stuff. Everyone knows what the good stuff is. So, you need to, and I think this is mainly apparent when the tournament time comes around, because everyone, takes the studying and the preparation into overdrive at that time. So, I think it becomes easy to be figured out when your whole modus operandi is just pick the good stuff, you know?
Maybe
Like, I've
they
been
have
saying-
a secret though. They might.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they do have some secrets.
Things I've been saying all season. I think Wrong has been the best player of the league this
Sure.
season so far.
Yeah.
Like I think he's just run it, and so I think we're going to see what Bolts did like over and over. I think pretty much every support has in the league, they have to have a Umoja. Like you just have to be good at that god. Almost everyone has a Ymir because he's been around forever. And Sobek, I mean, everyone knows. I know how to play Sobek, and I'm just going to say a word I'm not allowed to say on Smite Game, but I am not very good at this game. So like, if you just ban out those three, pick one, you know. And he still looked good in Athena. Don't get me wrong,
Yep.
but that was not the Leviathans we've seen all season, and you can't help but feel that's not a big part of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Titans versus the Valkyries here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this game for me was a bit of a formality. This was one of the easier shoe-ins because the Titans. Oh, I noticed I didn't even get the entire draft. Sorry about that. But yeah, the Titans, the Valkyries. I don't think anyone would argue aren't the worst team in the league right now. We even saw the Oni Warriors pull out a victory over them recently. And I believe it was the Valks who actually, one of their few wins were against the Oni Warriors. But regardless, yeah, I do think Scary D definitely found his stride. We spoke a little bit earlier while discussing one of the previous sets about his God pool, and Scary D definitely looks a lot more comfortable when he's playing tankier gods. Not necessarily full utility, because when we say utility, I think of guys like Twig, right? Who's going one defense item, then Pridwin, and tank. Scary D is definitely building damage, but I think on gods that are inherently tankier and have more control, allow him to play the way the game he sees. Because, you know, he's an obviously talented player, back-to-back world champ, but he's played solo for pretty much his whole career. And I'm sure it's difficult to change the perspective and way that you see team fights. He still sees team fights, I'm sure, through the lens of someone who's tanky and can control people. And so putting him on a god like Nemesis or something who lacks that, I don't think is really beneficial to him. But seeing him on gods like Fenrir, right? And Raven, I think, is one of the few assassins that he's better on. But even then, that is a god with root, slow, and stuff can provide some control and utility. I think that's when Scary D looks really good. And so I think this set for the Titans wasn't particularly difficult, but it was good for them to help settle Scary D and find the role that he can play within the team.
Yeah, now's the time to, I think, hate on the Zhong if you want to hate on the Zhong here, because you know, it did not look particularly great here. Not to blame zeros or anything, but you know, just didn't seem like the best pick going into the comp that the Titans had here. Especially Aurora's becoming, I think, more and more comfortable on this map and with his teammates in the core, and that's really starting to show with, you know, playing the Athena to set up and kill the tanky targets, like we like to say. I think it's a little bit odd though. We saw in this set that Ducky got Sun Wukong in both the games, and that's something that he hasn't really been getting a lot of Sun Wukong recently. What are you guys' thoughts on maybe leaving Sun Wukong out for him? Is Sun Wukong not as good as, you know, we thought in the past, or what's going on there?
I think he's just very one-dimensional. I mean, yeah, he's good early game. He has great rotations, but get to late game, he has a knock-up that's really just him running away, and a stun that's single target, and it takes time. He literally has to turn into a cougar and stun them.
Right.
And in that time, you're getting crit nonstop. So it's just not really something that warrants. We just drafted a first pick Wukong. We're feeling great about our draft, right? It could go either way, because you know what? Benji is going to pick King Arthur, Kakulin. He's fine in that matchup.
Sure.
Yeah, like I think Sun Wukong has been Ducky's best god by a mile, but at the same time, I agree with Kiki. It's like, you know, you still first pick in a Sun Wukong, and then you see them pick like all of their best gods. You kind of go, yeah, we probably should have done that as well, actually.
They're also picking him into pretty poor matchups Wukong's a solo laner that I'd categorize as clear and dip, whereas he doesn't really want to fight you in lane much. He wants to clear the wave, dip out, and impact the map. But the thing is, Arthur and Kakolin are going to like beat the life out of Wukong in lane, so he doesn't necessarily have the health pool or leverage, or to clear and rotate out of lane because they have him under tower. And so I think they recognize that we don't have to worry about the Wukong if we're going to bully it and have it under tower with Arthur Kakolin. A lot of the times when we saw him performing well on it, it was in the matchups like Guan Yu and Tsukiyomi, in which you can get away with that playstyle. And so I think if they do want to put Ducky on the Wukong, it'd probably be good for them to look at potentially banning out stuff like the Arthur and Kakolin so that he can leverage his clear speed and rotational ability.
Or Athena, by the way, because that's global pressure and invade
Yeah.
for free.
Of course, Kiki's repping the Athena solo. That's so on brand.
I know how it is.
With the meditation, I recall. With the meditation.
All right, let's move on to Group B here. I think there were 2 games in Group B. Let's start with the Oni Warriors versus the Solar Scarabs. And I was expecting my Bug Boys here to maybe put up a bit more of a fight, but somehow this one ends up at 2-0 for the Oni Warriors. It was a pretty crazy game 1. I don't know if you remember. Both the Titans go down to, I don't know, hundreds of health, I would say. And both teams get wiped out at a Titan, respectively. And I guess the Oni Warriors did the last killing, right? So they're the ones who win the game. It didn't look particularly like a great game for the Oni Warriors, but just sort of a fortuitous win. And unfortunately, that sort of snowballed for the Scarabs, and they didn't look particularly good, I think, in game 2. Any initial thoughts about this set? I know we see Zap play the Cupid, which we haven't really seen in a long time. I don't think it was a bad pick at all, but something of note.
Yeah, I think this set could have, and I would say should have been a 2-0 for the Solar Scarabs. It looks like they just got 2-0'd again and lost, but I mean, on the game 1 is their ending. Pretty big misplay from Bobby and Zap.
Yeah.
Bobby dies with Jingwei, ult beads, and Aegis. He gets Surbolted, and I guess he thought he could just dash it or whatever, but for whatever reason, he chose not to pop relics or ult. Bobby also did not beads, in which he could have been, whether he's wanting or the Titan or twoing his teammates. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the moment there. Comms are cluttered, and you're trying to secure the win, but pretty big misplays there. I definitely think they should have won that game. And going into game 2, they were a little bit sluggish in the early game, but I thought they outright won the draft with the Cupid pick alone. Cupid hard farms every single god on the Oni's draft except Ra, who now given the slow immunity on his 2.
Sure.
But if you are Cerberus into Cupid and you cannot go beads, what typically happens is you blink ult, the Cupid beads, he ults you and you die. Arthur, it doesn't matter. Obviously, we know how the cripple interacts with his kit. He can't do anything. Serket is a god who's relying on our mobility. If you catch Chiron in the middle of Cupid ult, Cleanse doesn't do enough, in which he can dash out of it. His ult still punish him. Just a really good Cupid pick, as well as Yamoja, forcing them to potentially have to go for the Curse Honk. I thought they won the draft outright, and they were team fighting really, really well, except the last fight in which Dardes just hit a nut snipe on Bronic and pretty much one-shot him. I think the only other follow-up damage was like a Cerberus too. But he gets raw sniped off the map for his entire health bar, and that was pretty much the fight in the game for him.
That happened in a couple of fights. He just free-handed a Rara. I mean, there's one where he hit 2 people at once, and just kind of the fight is already over at that point, right? Like you just have to run. But in game 1, just imagine being layers, right? Going through all of that, saving the game, and then your team runs up and dies. Dardes. I went back and watched how much player damage he did. I wrote it down somewhere. How much was it? He went from 21.2k, and by the time they killed them all, 27.4. He did 6k damage in that, and that's just like on the Titan. That's not like the fight beforehand. And so, it's just you cannot beat all people in one straight line. Like, it doesn't matter if you're all trying to get on the Titan. that was that was hard to watch because you could see it happening. You could see the health bar going down so slow. You're like, no, not again. But yeah, I think Dada's just ran game 2. It was the first time we've really seen Dada's kind of do Dada's stuff. You know, he's been so quiet this season, but like one of the best players in the game in my opinion. He's been really absent, but yeah, turned up.
Sure. Kiki, your thoughts?
Isn't he lagging, by the way, Dardis? There's
Oh yeah, he's in France. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, Dardis is known to pop off like individually in terms of mechanics. It's not really known for, I feel like, specific gods too much. Maybe like Uller or something. So as a mid laner now, he's trying to figure out what exactly works for him, right? And the raw, that's always a very comfortable thing. But looking at Solar's comp in game 2, I feel like it's very hard for them to find a kill. You're against a Chiron Serb, you know, all safe picks, even the raw is kind of safe because of his movement speed. And he has slow immunity, by the way, which is very important against Cupid. Besides that, you have Yamoja walls. Kakolan doesn't really, he has a root in his transform. So, like I said, they really gotta just figure out their drafts because they're putting in a bunch of good gods together, but they don't quite mesh well. They need to figure out what they want to do with them.
Sure. I'm actually glad to see Dardes picking up things like the Raw and the Raijin. I think they just are easier to hit abilities probably, even on the high ping. They're all nice and wide now, you know, thanks to you know, there are some Raijin buffs. It used to be a lot harder to hit Raijin 1 before like 3 months ago. So, you know, pick the easy guys, Dardes, and just farm people. You know, it doesn't matter what the ping is if they're dead.
I think it's kill potential for sure. Like he needs to be able to, you know, with Uller, like you can just kill anyone you want. So Dardes needs to get in there, and he wants it to get bloody.
Sure. Any other things to talk about? I did want to mention, I feel like when you, Vani, you talked about Cupid into Serb, I think we saw that exact play happen in Worlds, and I think that led to basically a PK win in a grand finals, right? Of, you know, Zap just waiting out a Serb ult, and, you know, I think that experience is a good thing, but that probably also affected Zap in a bad way, where he's like, oh, I'll just hold everything, it'll be fine, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's it's hard to balance that, of course, if you're Zap, right? Like, you just either have to know and do it, and you know, deal with the outcome when it happens, right? So it's not too much you can really say about that. Any final thoughts you guys have about Oni Warriors versus the Solar Scarabs here?
When Zap finds his Aegis key, man, this team is gonna be unstoppable.
All right, then let's move on to the last game of the week. I think one of the best games. I think all the games this week have been pretty good. A lot of 3-game sets. I think there's a big distinction from early on in the season when we're seeing a lot of 2-0s. Now we're seeing a lot of teams fight back in the middle of these sets. The last game of the week was Jade Dragons versus the Camelot Kings. I think game 1, the Kings basically look as methodical as possible. And, you know, I don't want to use the cliche or anything, but that sleeping dragon gets woken up again after being defeated in game 1, and then games 2 and 3. I think game 2 especially was the Sam show on the Pele. You know, recent buffs, I guess. I don't know if it's recent buffs, but I guess nerfs to Shell have made Pele a pickable god. I don't want to say viable because we've only really seen one good Pele showing so far in the SPL. What are you guys' thoughts on the Kings versus Jade Dragons? Are these sort of the top 2 teams in the league at this point, or Leviathan still in that mix, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know who. Okay, so first before I say who I personally think is the best, the Dragons have beaten the Kings twice now. The Dragons have lost though to the Bolts. The Bolts, though, have lost to the Leviathans and the Kings, even though the Bolts are the only team of the other 3 to beat the Dragons.
And I think the Bolts are one of the only teams to beat the Leviathans, too.
Yeah, so they are 1-1, the Leviathans and Bolts, in their matchup. So on any given day, all 4 of these teams we've seen so far can take games off of each other. So I think it's really just up to, I don't want to say preference, but I guess so, on which one that you think is the best. And maybe it's some bias, some name bias here, but it's still difficult for me to truly say I think the Bolts are the best. I still think the top two are the Dragons and the Kings. And even though the Kings did lose this set, I still do believe that the Kings are the best team in the league right now, even though I think it's such a close margin that, even in saying that doesn't really hold much merit. But in regards to the set, I love to see the Kings. I think they're the first team to find their identity. And I don't think it's any surprise that they were also one of the first teams formed in the offseason. I think this team has a lot of cohesion together. Twig and Variety have played together before, obviously. Genetics, BMT, both being European players, I'm sure have a lot of familiarity. And Netroid is a plug-and-play guy who's going to do his job no matter where he is. And Big Man Tings, towards the end of last year, was a top 3 mid. Coming in, I think he's been one of, if not the best outright. With a guy that plays utility like Twig, he's allowed to get his farm funneled into him and really carry the games. I also think they have some of the best macro in the league. I think Captain Twig and Genetics are two of the better minds in Smite. And Variety has had a return to form, I think, being in an environment in which he's a lot more comfortable and with friends. And I think all of that combines to allow this team to be the powerhouse that they are. The Dragons, though, did manage to eke this out, and I think they did so in kind of the just most Jade Dragons-esque fashion. I thought they lost the draft coming into every single game, but they just won by just pushing their buttons better. Like they didn't really snowball early game, barring the game 2, in which I thought that if they did not win this game in 20 minutes, it was over. But I love that they have the confidence in themselves to do that. In game 3 was similar. Mike just kind of picked Gilgamesh support. Hurry picked Baba, and they just decided we don't want to lose, so they didn't.
Yeah, Gilgamesh support is not something I was expecting at all. And I did also want to touch on here real quick. I forgot my point. Go ahead, guys. Talk about Gilgamesh support.
Look, I want to jump in and say I fully agree with everything that Vonnie just said about the Kings. I feel like they found how they want to play before anyone else did. And the thing I love about watching them play is they just refuse to lose. Like, they do not know when they're beaten. I feel like there are so many teams who, when they get down, they just kind of turtle up, slowly watch all their towers get taken, and then lose because they're 20k gold down, yeah. But they just scrap. They scrap constantly in these like really awkward fights. They make it so difficult to win, and it makes it such a like for a team like the Dragons as well. It's such a like knife edge sort of game because it's like Dragons want to snowball a win, and the Kings just will, like dig their heels in. And like you're saying, it's this kind of battle where it's like, can the Dragons get it over the line? 'Cause if they don't, you see stuff like what happened in game 1 where Tings just had enough room to, do Tiamat things. Quick shout out to Tiamat minions, by the way. But yeah, like they just funnel everything into Tings. Let Tings do his stuff. Like you said, Variety is looking like old Variety all over again. And they're such an interesting team to watch. They just run the map and really dig their heels in. But then you've got the Dragons who just like when they snowball so much harder than I think any other team in history. I'm talking about them and Ghost and whatever. Like it's always been kind of a meme. I think that people think you can just kind of end a game in 20 minutes or pick a snowball comp or whatever, because in pro games that like rarely works. But like when Sam gets going on the map and there's no pressure against him, he just like will end a game. I think that's how teams have done best against the Dragons historically. Like when the Bolts beat them, you had Lasbra just chasing Sam around on Circuit all game long, and he just had no chance to breathe. But then once they've got that pressure and he can go where he pleases, stuff like that Pele game happened. Even when they're snowballing that hard, the Kings make it so difficult, which is what I think is so good to watch for them.
Sure. That was what the thought I wanted to bring up was the minions, and I think that's a point on Bonnie's thought there about the macro play that the Kings are able to execute, right? Like where they're just able to keep the J Dragons around them long enough for the macro play of letting the minions, kill the Titan. That's a pretty smart and not easily executable plan. Sorry to cut you off there, Kiki. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that you notice on King's side they're running like around 3 to 4 of the same gods. You have Chiron, Lulu, Yamoja, and Erlang being, they're just mixing and matching them, and then they make sure they have enough CC, enough frontline, and enough damage. And really, that's really all you need in Smite, right? Like there isn't much you need. You need to CC them, you need to do damage, and you need to not die. But you look at J Dragons, who it looks like they just log on. They say, "What are we gonna kill these guys with? We want this game over and done, right?" Like Gilgamesh is our flavor of the week,
Yeah.
and they just do it. They really do just do it in the end.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see the Gilgamesh support. I wasn't able to catch this last game. How effective was Mike on the Gilgamesh support, or was it just a classic Mike game where, he's doing whatever he wants, running in your face, invading your buffs?
In your face.
Yeah, he died a decent bit in
Uh-huh.
the early game, but it worked out well for them because I think Sam in some of the previous games, I think he's kind of been like having a bit of an identity crisis, finding his way in the meta. I remember a while back when tanky junglers became meta, Sam was still building transcendence full damage every game. He didn't care because he's always been a hard carry. But this season, we've seen him play like hybrid Raven, where he'll go like Blink Sunder and play with a black backline. We've seen him play tanky Circuit. But this game, Mike picked Gilgamesh and said, I'm just going to be a meat show. I'm going to run in and get every single available resource so that Sam can come in and clean up. And it worked out well for them.
Yeah, their team fight comp was nasty as well. Panda Cats, Zanzabura as well. Those rockets were filthy.
Yeah, he
Like,
was so aggressive on it.
every
It was crazy.
fight. You just hear they go in the background.
And I saw Herwin tweet after, I only picked Baba because no one else was gonna do it. But Baba is the perfect mage when you have no other magical damage. Her potions, it's so much little burst damage that really starts to trickle in. You have the house, which is constant AoE flames. I mean, I think it was perfect. And I think he's pranking us, telling us he thinks this god's really good. He's gonna start pulling it out, I think, when these games are a bit more important.
One more thing. Or go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, I was gonna say the teams that are at the top right now. Dan mentioned about how scary, or not scary. I'm sorry. Sam kind of just got ran down by Lazarus Arquette. I think the reason they're so close is because it's kind of like a four-way rock paper scissors. I think stylistically, some teams are better into the other ones. Like the Bolts don't mind putting Lasbra on a tanky Circuit or utility jungler and just saying, you play man coverage every fight on Sam so he can hyper carry, and we'll win the fight on the backside. And the Kings are a team who really play really, really well, map macro. But for a team like Dragons who just pours on the pressure, it can be difficult to play the map that way. But then you look at a team like Leviathans who do also play the game slower, can be exploited by the Kings' really, really good macro. And so it's really interesting to watch all of those four teams at the top play against each other and exploit the strengths and weaknesses of the other.
It's that time of week again. Time for our analysts and myself to make our picks for the next week of SPL games. Let's start with Vonnie here, since you are on my left, with Leviathans versus Titans. Who you got here?
I'm an Aurora fanboy, so Titans all the way.
Titans all the way, 2-0 for Titans?
Yep. Unbiased. 2-0.
All right, Dan, how about you? Leviathans versus Titans. This could be a pretty good one.
Yeah, I think obviously the bookies' money would be with Leviathans. I think it's going to be a lot closer than it would have been like 2 weeks ago, but I've got to go Leviathans 2-0 on this.
Sure. Kiki?
Yep. Titans 2-1. That's what I would say.
Is this another Aurora fanboy pick here, Kiki? I know you and Aurora are pretty good friends.
Do I gotta hide it? Come on. Chunk for life.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really scary, right? If the Leviathans lose the first two games of the group stage, that's I mean, like, I know the top three are gonna make it, but if you lose two games, that can't be good. So it's really hard. I don't know. I think I'm gonna give it to the Leviathans 2-1. All right, Dan, let's start with you on this one. Jade Dragons versus Solar Scarabs here. Who you got in this one?
Ooh, it's the Zapman against Ghost. It's happening again.
It's happening again.
Everyone bet on Dragons to beat them last time, and everyone was wrong, except for Pam himself
True.
saw it coming from a mile off. No, I think Dragons 2-1.
Dragons 2-1. Kiki, who you got in this? Jade Dragons versus Solar Scarabs.
So wait, they lost last time they played?
Yeah, Solar
Yep.
Scarabs
Right.
beat them 2-1.
J Dragons 2-0 because they're pissed. So
That sounds about right. Bonnie, you want to
Mhm.
wrap us up here on this one?
Yep. I know they're pissed, man, but I don't know. Zap literally just has Panic at Summer. I don't know why, but Zap does not lose to these guys ever. And so I'm going to go 2-1 Solar Shares over J Dragons.
okay.
I agree with you. I actually think Zap is just in their heads. Like, he knows how they, like, when they're like penetration testers for banks and like they know how the crisis management team is going to respond or whatever. Zap just knows what the
Yeah.
crisis management response is for the Jade Dragons, and he just is able to play around it so well. I think we saw that, pretty often in the finals last year, and even in some of the sets that they've played so far in the SPL. I just think he and part of it, of course, is confidence too, right? Like he just feels like he knows, and it ends up working out for him. So I'm going with the Scarabs 2-0 on this one. You can't catch me slipping here. All right,
Fair,
Kiki,
fair.
let's start with you on the Bolt versus the Valhalla Valkyries. Who do you think is going to win this set?
I'll go 2-1 Bolts for sure. I love
2-1
them.
Bolts from Kiki. All right, Vonnie, who you got here?
2-0 boats as well. Or 2-0 boats. Yeah, I think these would be pretty quick games as well.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, 2-0 Bolts. I think Venenu is just running the mid lane at the moment, and Zero. Actually, who's going to pick Zhong this set? Let's be two Zhong players.
Hopefully none of them. Hopefully none of them.
Right, it's whoever picks Zhong, they're losing. That's all I've got.
I think it's going to be 2-0 Bolts as well. I was trying to get Raffer to do the player interview, and he's like, hey, man, no offense or anything. I'd love to do an interview, but, asking me questions is not going to be a great thing. All I'm going to say is, the pig is making our life suck. So, I feel for Raf. I love him a lot, but unfortunately, it's just some, crazy circumstances here. So I'm going to go for 2-0 for the Bolts here. I think we're back where we started. Bonnie, you want to give us your take on the Camelot Kings versus the Oni Warriors?
I think 2-1 Camelot Kings here. Oni Warriors did finally get a win, but it was over the Scarabs, and I do think they labored across the finish line in that set. And I do think with the Kings being one of the premier teams in the league right now, it'll be a tough ask for the Warriors to find something. So 2-0 Kings.
Dan?
I think this is the most organized team versus maybe the least organized team. I think this is going to be a quick 2-0 Kings.
Quick 2-0 for the Kings from Dan. Kiki, how about you?
Yeah, unless the Warriors somehow find a chink in the drafting that is the Kings right now. 2-0 Kings.
2-0 Kings. I think I'm also on the 2-0 Kings train here. I like to be a contrarian, but sometimes there's viewer points to be won, right? All right, Dan, let's start with you on this next set, which is going to be the Atlantis Leviathans versus the Valhalla Valkyries. I think we're probably going to say a lot of the same things that we said about the Bolts versus the Valkyries. Is that, you think it's going to be a 2-0 for the Leviathans?
It's going to be ugly. 2-0 Leviathans.
Kiki, how about you?
What were the teams again?
The Leviathans versus the Valkyries.
Oh, yeah. I'll go 2-1 though. I want to see some good games. We need competition.
Sure. Bonnie, wrap us up here.
Yep, I think 2-1 Leviathans. I do think the Valks could sneak out a game just because of how Leviathans play so slow late game, where it's just a toss up. One team fight decides the match.
Yeah. I am probably going to vote for the Leviathans here as well, unfortunately. 2-0 from me.
2-0. All right.
All right, Dan. Who you got for Jade Dragons versus Oni Warriors?
Feel a bit boring saying it, but 2-0 Dragons. I just don't think Oni are there yet.
Sure.
I think maybe later in the season, but not on this ping.
Kiki, same for you. Dragons versus gonna beat the Oni Warriors, or? upset
You're just
city.
assuming?
I'm
Nah,
asking.
Oni Warriors are gonna just really launch in. They're gonna do like the Power Rangers morphine stuff, and now they're coming for the dragons. And also keep in mind, dragons are gonna not take them seriously. So
Sure.
we're gonna see Oni win the first game. J Dragon's gonna win the second game, but too late. Oni Warriors coming in for that 2-1.
All right, Owning Warriors 2-1 from Kiki. Okay, I won't assume anymore. Bonnie, who you got in this one?
So my pick for this week is it's influenced by the fact that I'm pretty confident the Dragons are going to lose to the Scarabs in the previous week.
Mhm.
So I don't know if they're going to be tilted that they lost to the Scarabs again
Sure.
and slip against the Warriors, or if they're going to be tilted that they lost and then just absolutely take one out on the. You know what? 2-1 Oni Warriors, man. The
Yes.
Dragons are gonna slide. The
Yes.
Dragons are gonna slide because of Steven Zappis.
I think I'm gonna give this one to the Dragons. As much as I want to see, I think it'll be super entertaining if the Warriors are able to win, but somehow I just don't see that possibility making it. All right, I think we're starting with you here, Kiki, for the Olympus Bolts versus the Tartarus Titans. Who you got in this one?
Ooh, now that is a really tricky one. I guess it would lie on, Laspra versus Scary. That's going to be a really cool matchup.
Yep.
They're both people willing to take a chance.
Mhm.
And so I guess I would say I'm going to go with Bolts for now, honestly. I'm going to go 2-1. I think there are going to be some really good 40, 50-minute games, though.
Sounds good. That's what I like to see. Bonnie, how about you? Who you got in this one?
I do think this will probably be the closest set that we'll have this
Mhm.
weekend. And I think 2-1 for the Titans.
2-1 for the Titans. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, this set was insanely close the other day. I think Bolts look like the better team over the course of the 3 games,
Mhm.
but I think Titans have got more to play for. So I want to see the Titans at 2-1.
2-1 Titans. I think unfortunately the Bolts are going to win this one. I think they're just rolling sort of too strong, and especially Veneno is really looking good. So I think it's going to be 2-1 Bolts. But I'm all for lots of 40, 50-minute games. So I hope Kiki's prediction is correct.
We'll
All
see.
right, last game of the week is the Kings versus the Scarabs. Bonnie, you want to start us off on this one?
I think Kings clean 2 over the Scarabs.
Dan?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the Kings are just they are made to beat the lower end teams. They might lose to the higher end teams, but they always beat the lower end ones. So,
Sure.
2 Kings.
Kiki?
Unless they solidify a certain comp they really like, I don't think they could break through.
I mean, I gotta go 2-0 for my boys here. What sort of fan would I be if I didn't pick the Solar Scarabs to win, right? Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown. Be sure to catch the SPL Rundown every week on Thursdays before the SEC and the SPL. Thursday mornings, bright and early. Get your SPL fix and then go watch these nice SEC games. If you want to catch extended cuts or past episodes of the SPL Rundown, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Just search APM Productions on YouTube and you should be able to get to us. If you have any ideas for guests in the future, or people, analysts you want to see on here, players you want me to interview, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at APAM2 or at APAM Productions. Lastly, I want to thank my analysts here for being on the show. I think we'll start with you, Vonnie. Why don't you shout yourself out?
Yep, I'm Vonton, known as the Twitter guy. You can find me at Vonnie Balboa for Daily Bangers.
Dan?
I can vouch. Daily bangers. Name's Dan on Twitter. Dan edits YouTube. Betty Smite Esports.
Kiki?
Kiki here. I play Smite, and you should too. That's it.
That's it. All right, thanks a lot for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. See you guys next week.